Very specifically, the disclaimer on this presentation, I'm going to talk very much around northern beef and northern beef production systems. Hopefully that's an appetite for conversation to understand what a southern beef production system is. Has walkover weighing even got a place in southern beef and southern sheep systems? And if it does, what do we need to do as engineers to actually engineer the product? So what we're looking at here is a typical deployment in northern beef, whether it be in a corporate or a large family. And one of the key aspects you're seeing here is that this is acclimation. This is day 3 of acclimation animals to the actual draft gate movement. So one thing that we have to do in a walkover weighing system is we have to acclimate the cattle to the system. Now, in the north, they have a piece of technology that's been around for 100 years that we're able to jump off, which was one-weight spear gates. I'm not sure if people are familiar with spear gates or bayonet gates. Down here, I know they're not very well, they're not used at all pretty much in the south. But this is a very low-tech self-mustering system, which allows animals to go in through one bayonet system and exit out through another. So the query, when we got approached by the producers, this was the original concept 10 years ago, was that if we've already got animals in a single file coming in and out of these self-mustering systems, can we just stick a scale or a reader or something in front of them that could not only collect their data, but actually action a management process? Now, the management could be, the original concepts of management were a couple of things. One was, can we just draft that animal off for sale? Or can we do things like apply a backline or animal health? Like we have one of our big issues in the north is, especially that's in the ticky country, so how do we actually control tick and fly and all those sort of things? So, so the concept really was based around how does the system work in these self-mustering systems, which is very unique to northern production systems. So then we set out on a series of trials over the last 10 years where we've worked with MLA, we've worked with Queensland Government, Northern Territory Government, Western Australian Government, and various CRCs. And a lot of these trial programs that we went into were a common, MLA in Queensland Government or Queensland Government and Northern Territory Government. So we really honed in on the production systems. Things we found that we had to fix, I suppose, and this is exactly to Sean's point, is that you can design something, but until you put it in the paddock, it is literally, you really do not know how it's going to go. Chewings of cables, just seems such a trivial little thing in the early days, but learnt very, very quickly that everything has to be protected. The biggest thing really when we start talking about this technology is how do we design the physical contraption to be non-intrusive in the environment of cattle? If we're going to ask cattle to do things automatically, robotically, without any humans involved, then we really need to make the system human friendly. So a large part of our research over the first 5 years was purely around animal behaviour. So we really focused, we weren't even really focused that heavily on the tech at that stage. We were purely focused on how do we build a system that is not onerous for producers to train cattle and acclimate cattle to, and that therefore get use and then not be a barrier to entry. So there's a couple of things that we've really worked us on and focused that have really driven the system. But look, what I'll just go through, I'll just run through the actual components. Obviously, the system is completely solar powered because it's got to run 24/7 out on these stations. We have a draft gate that's controlled by electric over hydraulic. Now, that was no mean engineering feat to be able to get 3,000 drafts happening a day on some of our bigger deployments based on solar power, run 24/7. The engineering behind the actual draft gate components was no mean feat. That took 2 years on its own. There's an RFID reader. We just started with some off-the-shelf RFID readers and found that we had a lot of trouble keeping them running 24/7. Mostly when you deploy an e-tag reader on your farm, you're taking it to the crush or you're taking it to the yards, you're using it, you're putting it back in the cupboard or you're taking it home and charging it. Actually, to get RFID readers to run on solar effectively when you've got large swings in charges during the day was a challenge. We basically had to redesign the guts behind the e-tag reader system to make it actually work effectively on solar on that front. And then the most critical part of the actual system is this platform design. We have gone through about 7 iterations of this platform design. The first platforms that we thought that we would actually use would be sort of like a more typical cattle platform that you would put into your crush, but we actually found in the early days we had 2 major issues. One is that it was very tinny and felt very foreign underfoot for the animals. So animals weren't naturally wanting to put their foot actually up on there and actually move through. And the second thing is that we had a huge fouling issue in the north. We have a lot of sandy country, and this is a great example of actually how sandy the soil in the country actually is up here. It would literally take a week and that platform would be blocked up and just would not weigh accurately. So when we talk about walkover weighing, we can have the best walkover weighing algorithms that you can see, but if we can't get the compression of the platform and the load cells working correctly, then we are never going to get a working weight. So that was a large part of our focus. So our actual units are designed to be buried in the ground and work off that. So as you can see, even though this was on a little bit of cement slab, because this country breaks up quite dramatically, but mostly the platform is actually covered with dirt. So it completely takes away the scariness and this odd feel and this odd smell of something that's foreign in their environment. It just feels like they're walking on normal ground. Just while I'm on this video, is there any questions relating to this, what you're actually seeing here right at the moment? Cool, we can come back to that. So the system that we've currently designed for northern beef is split into 2 products. We have just the weighing only product, which has the ear tag reader, solar panel, 3G or 4G communications, and the no foul platform with a couple of batteries up here to make it run 24/7. You can start with the weighing platform, and then you can also add a draft gate onto the end of it. Interestingly, a lot of people think, or when they see the system, they see the drafting, they get carried away with the drafting capabilities and think that's where the actual saving is. What we're actually finding through actual deployments, especially in the corporate space, is that the information is delivering 80% of the value. The draft gate is just that nice to have thing that if you've got a particular setup, that allows you to draft into a laneway or into a holding paddock, then that's where it becomes valuable. But mostly the information that's being collected through these systems is where the value in the product is. And this is as basic of setup as you need to just start getting into walkover weighing. So this is Newcastle Waters in the Northern Territory with CPC, one of our major clients. And this is a Mitchell Grass Downs paddock. There's 5 waters in this particular paddock. It's rotationally grazed by turning the waters on and off in this particular scenario. And as you can see, the installation is extremely simple. It's portable panels with the walkover weighing unit, animals going in and out of this system back and forth, and we're able to capture their weights. The portable panels can be replaced with electric fence. We have electric fence deployed systems, but you always need a portable panel either side. What we actually found is when we tried to tie electric fence off right at the edge of the walkover weighing, cattle would get a little bit antsy about trying to line themselves up, and they didn't actually particularly like it. Once they knew the electricity was back off, they flowed through much more comfortably on that front. But that is as literally as basic a design you need to start collecting weights. You can then go into a more technical system. This is a deployment on a Queensland place that's actually using electric fence. So I'm sorry about the poor quality. This is actually photo coming, which comes from the unit, which comes standard. So as well as the walkover weighing, there's a camera that comes on the side of the machine, so we can always point it back towards the trough and actually see that there's water in the actual trough. As you can see out here, there's actually electric fence running out, and this is a cell centre. So typical cell centre deployment and you can see these traps here coming into the system. This is allowing the self-mustering system for those animals to trap in and out of each cell, come and get a drink. Their only way out is through the outspeed of the auto drafter, and then the auto drafter puts them back into their cell. So what the producer uses this for is be able to do a 4 paddock rotation in this particular cell centre, and using the auto drafter to change cells. So be it the day that the animals ran out of feed in this cell, the auto drafter will trigger and put them through the next cell the next time they come into water. And then at the same time, he can also use it to harvest out the cattle into a previous cell, the ones he wants to go to market. So this is a fully auto solution, and as I said, most of the value is still coming from the weights. It's just you're able to go to full automation. And then we have some systems that we've been working with in New South Wales on electric tape systems, which this is on a lateral irrigator with a producer grazing this system, and being able to use the auto drafter to understand weight gains and be able to cause a draft or action a draft here. And just by closing and opening electric fence gates, the producer, it's a more of a hands-on method, but the producer can literally go down and just open and close gates as the animals move through. So similar system to the spoke cell, but this is obviously in a lateral system. Now, one thing I really need to explain here is that there is a misconception about what walkover weighing is. The perception of what walkover weighing is that an animal will cross a platform and it will get its weight. Now, realistically, walkover weighing does not produce a weight every pass. It purely depends on how the animal presents to the system. We don't put gates or anything in the road of those animals that could cause animal welfare issues like locking animals on or off water or on or off feed. So we're purely based to how the animal wants to present through to the system. So what that effectively means that in any 100 passes of any 100 random animals, there's usually about 60 good weights in that particular pass. But what it is because these animals are living on the system, they're coming through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week. Basically what we're getting is that just purely by the amount of time that these animals are presenting to the platform, we're able to, over a week, understand what the average weight of that animal is over that week, and also taking into effect their gut fill. Now, what we're looking at here is this is the dashboard, the MyHub dashboard where the walkover weights come into. This is a property in Richmond, which is an MLA PDS site, Richmond beef site, for 2018. So this is last year's data, up to the point where I've been using this in the presentation. But basically, this is the summary we get on a paddock level. So all the walkover weights are being collected up over the week. Every one of these little dots is each week. And that's gathered up all the weights of all the animals for that. So what we're seeing here is that at the end of 2017, I think that is, late in the season, it was that's 2018, January 2018, we see it was a very late wet. So we've seen that these animals are plateauing, they're not doing any weight gain, and then they're actually just tipping into a negative plane in nutrition. Just at that right time in March, this paddock actually got a rain. What actually happens in walkover weighing in the north when we get a rain, the cattle scatter. So they go and live off surface water for a period of time, and as that surface water dries up, they start coming back onto the system. So as they start coming back onto the system, we can actually start to now get them coming back on until that water's dry, and then we're able to track week on week the trajectory of these animals all the way through. Now, the goal of this production system is to sell these animals at the peak of their growth. So sell these animals the heaviest they're going to be within this 12 months. In the north, we've got a wet season and a dry season. So when we get rain, the cattle grow. When it's in the dry season, animals can move into a negative plane nutrition. We want to sell those animals right at the top. And what you're seeing in this big drop is the actual lead being taken out. So what I want to stress here is that walkover weighing data, like everything, needs a context. You need to know how you've managed your animals to understand what you're actually seeing here. So what you're actually seeing here, it looks like there's a drop in weight. It's actually not a drop in weight. That is actually the lead being harvested out and taken away. So you've readjusted your new average weight. We have a little draft up tool here at the present, which you're able to put a minimum max weight in, and then it'll give you a breakup of how many animals are in that in each one of those segments. Now that is really focused at sale cattle. So really knowing that if I want to hit a grid, how many have I got in the sweet zone for this grid? The other thing to remember with walkover weighing data, it is full body weights. It's full. We're taking an average of, typically we've got the animal coming in, getting a drink and getting weighed. So we are weighing the animal full, which is very different to us if you've got a curfewed weight. So that's a distinction that you need to make between walkover weighing data and crush side data. But as you can see, the trend is, because we're always weighing full to full, when we're looking at growth rates and trends, it trends very accurately. Then each click through the software takes you in further into the data set. So we've just had a look at the average of the herd, but what we're actually looking at here is now the distribution of the herd. So this click here, you can start to see is how many head you've actually got between each weight range, and you can actually just click on that weight range on this weight range here, and it'll actually take you through to the individuals in that group. So it gives you the ability again to be able to do a draft up very quickly and send that information out to the machine, or at least know before you go and muster that paddock that you've got enough there to have minimise your unders and overs. You're actually going to go in there and you're going to have the right amount of cattle or the right amount of sheep. So we're very focused on minimising the number of times you're going into the paddock to minimise weight loss through mustering and the cost of mustering. And then the next click takes you into any of the individual animals. This is this particular RFID, and this is now the individual animals' live weight gain data over time. So where we're generally looking or start to we're not doing that much analysis on this data currently as yet. That's in the next phase of the software. But mostly where we're looking at these is if the producer has seen an animal hanging in the corner of the paddock, or an animal looks sick around the water, the producer will grab its FID tag or its visual tag, and then come back and look that visual tag up on the system, which will match it to the RFID tag, and you might see if there's a bit of a trend for that animal that's been sick or perishing or doing something silly over time. But that's mostly where we're seeing producers in their click rates just using this individual animal tab just to click through individual animals if there's a problem. Now, to be very clear on this, this is the entirety of the software package at the moment. We've really focused this product at northern beef and sale cattle. So animals that we classify sale cattle be that animals that are being sold in this 12 months. And that's where this software has really been focused. So in our next phase, and I'm going to go through it here, is that we're actually going to focus on some female modules to be very female specific. But I just want to take you through to one other producer in the Northern Territory who also has a horticultural block, and he's been growing Rhodes grass and actually feeding cattle on this, grazing cattle on the roads, who's deployed one of these systems to understand what management decisions he's making and how is that affecting his live weight gain in his cattle and therefore making money. So it was interesting, this particular one, is that we can actually start to see what the effect of the management decision actually equals in weight gain. So this little weight loss here, so this was a summer Rhodes grass that was undersown with oats to be able to provide a winter feed. So oats will grow through the winter. As it gets warmer, the oats dies and the Rhodes grass then takes off being summer active. So we can actually see that going through winter, and then we start to get a bit of a weight decline going on through here, and that was basically when the oat crops was running to head. The oat or the pasture quality of that particular, or the feed quality of that oats was going down. So we're starting to see a decline. Then we see that the Rhodes grass started to kick back in, and it started to become active, and we got on a positive plane in nutrition. And then interestingly, this little dip here was actually when fertiliser was applied a week previously, and after that week of fertiliser, we actually started to see the animals go through a little bit kick. They're all around on positive plane nutrition, but they had a kick after that. So for this producer, we're really quantifying what farming decisions he was making, and actually how was he, because he was turning this grass into beef, what was the return on each one of these, especially on the fertiliser run. So that's just an example of how this particular producer was using the data to validate a management decision and knowing whether it was actually even worth doing. So females. So our next phase of development, we're really going to start focus on how do we use this. We know how to use this information for sale cattle in the north, but now we want to really understand how we use this information for females and what value does that bring through. We've stumbled along this almost by accident, but what we actually found is if we're monitoring animal live weights in time, when the animal gives birth, we see a large drop in weight. Now, this is very breed specific. Wagyus obviously have give a much smaller drop, and we are finding quite large drop in Brahman. So we have a fair bit of work to understand if this is breed specific or whether it's across the board. However, what we had found by accident was that when an animal gives birth, we get a large drop in weight, which we can pick up on we typically find that we can pick it over a week. So sometimes what we find in the north is that cattle might be in the back end of the dry season, might be 2 or 3 days between drinking cycles. So it might actually take us 3 to 5 days to understand that there actually has been a drop in live weight at that particular time. But then we can track the lactation period. This was the weaning period, and then we can also track what the recovery after weaning was. So when I say we stumbled over this, is that these particular animals were preg tested empty, literally just in a paddock, waiting to go to the boat, just to put a little bit of fat on. And then we had 5 animals in this group of 55 started to just lose weight on the system, and honestly, we actually thought we had a technical issue. Couldn't work out why just 5 of these animals were underweighing for whatever reason. And as we got frustrated and jumped on a bike and went for a ride, we actually found calves on the ground. And that was the sort of the ha-ha moment. Okay, because we're measuring weight in a time series, we can see if there's a big sharp change literally within a week period, and then what that threshold is to understand if that's a calving event. Now, we thought that was great, but how do we use this? In a project with Queensland Government and NT Government, we started to have a look that you're not going to deploy a walkover weighing system on all your female herds. It becomes a very costly exercise. Maybe over the 50 years you might have a development plan to do that, but how do we effectively get this information and actually make some use out of it? So the idea was thrown up through a couple of the corporates in the Northern Territory was that, well, if we only deployed these systems on our maiden heifers, and please, actually, this is actually a mature cow at 600 kilos. So sorry, I haven't. This was the user case, but not the particular animal. But what we wanted to understand in our maiden first calves is if we deployed this system, if we can understand the intercalving interval, which is a big thing in the Northern Territory, or Northern beef, we really need to understand if an animal can maintain a 12-month breeding cycle. So basically, if we're tracking the maidens and first calves over time before they go to the mixed age herd, we can actually use another piece of information to understand whether that animal has got a chance of making a 12-month cycle. So we can get the first calving event, and we can lock that as a date and time. We can see what the decline under lactation is. We can see then what the recovery post-weaning is, and then we can look at when the next drop was. So by being able to ensure that these drops occur in less than 12 months, then we can understand that the animal has got the ability to maintain a 12-month breeding cycle. So we can actually just put that little information on the phenotype selection that the producers are making also. And it is worth noting that there is also an intervention to be had here as well. So if, for instance, some animals are not recovering back to a pre-joining weight or are pregnant and are not really getting to an ideal calving weight, there is an ability there that we might actually remove those animals before joining anyway. So we're trying to decrease any calving loss that may occur, so at least we can keep the female and sell her as surplus to requirement when she's fat. But we do this recovery does allow us a situation to intervene. Just interesting in this particular season that this cow was at 600 kilos but never returned to 600 kilos before the next season. So that's a real indication of what that season was like. So then at what point? Interesting, just off this in the cow data, is that then if you're using this pre-weight, that what we're actually finding is producers are wanting to use this data rather than actually to determine a weaning weight, but they want to actually wean on the calf weight, on the cow weight. So you want animals to not drop below that condition score 3. So we can see this clearly here. So on that front, so we might, this particular cow was weaned about 3 months earlier than in the traditional season, based on the season itself. Really want to stress though, that is very future for us. We're very much focused on sale animals and optimising the sale, that is where we are going with the software. So again, just to wrap up, you can use this technology in full automation. So things like linking laneways, and paddocks to take full advantage of the drafting system for harvesting cattle for paddocks, for sale, or even for paddock movements and rotational grazing. But where we're seeing the 80% of the deployment of this technology, at least in the north, is it's really focused in on targeting the sale cattle just for walkover weighing, just to know when you should be going in and mustering those animals and that you've actually got animals that are at target weight, and also for validating supplementation programs. So monitoring what the supplement intake is and what that actually equals in growth, and producers being able to conduct that on their own property. So that's where we're seeing the largest deployment of the technology in the north. Very corpus focused, over 5,000 head producers. So that's where we're focused at the present. Thank you.
Thank you for that very much indeed.